Most movies, it takes a lifetime to have that much drama. But that's what movies are about. And when you come to Yellowstone,
The most watched television drama in America suddenly lost its star. After 4.5 seasons playing the iconic John Dutton, Kevin Costner walked away from Yellowstone at the height of its power. Was it really just scheduling conflicts as initially claimed? Or did Hollywood's most notorious power struggles, ego, money, and creative control, destroy television's biggest modern Western? Today, we finally reveal what actually happened behind the scenes of the television phenomenon that transformed how America views itself. Yellowstone premiered on June 20th, 2018, on the then unremarkable Paramount Network. What began as a calculated risk, a modern Western in an era of superhero dominance, transformed into a cultural touchstone that would reshape television. The show centers on the Dutton family, led by patriarch John Dutton, played by Kevin Costner, as they fight to protect their sprawling Montana ranch from developers, Native American land claims, and internal family chaos. Creator Taylor Sheridan, a former actor turned screenwriter who penned critically acclaimed films like Sicario and Hell or High Water, brought an authentic voice to the project. But it was Costner's involvement that elevated Yellowstone from cable television gamble to prestige drama. Paramount knew this. They reportedly paid Costner $500,000 per episode in season one, a figure that would later balloon to a reported $1.3 million per episode as the show's popularity surged. The investment paid off spectacularly. By its fourth season, Yellowstone had become the most watched cable television show since The Walking Dead, with the season 4 finale drawing over 15 million viewers. The series spawned an entire universe of spin-offs, including 1883, 1923, and 6666, expanding the Dutton family saga across centuries. For Costner, the role represented a career renaissance, reuniting him with the American West that had defined some of his greatest cinematic triumphs in films like Dances with Wolves and Open Range. The success shocked even industry insiders. Yellowstone captured something elusive in American culture, a rugged individualism and family loyalty set against breathtaking landscapes, paired with sophisticated writing that avoided political simplification. The show appealed across traditional demographic divides, becoming popular in both conservative rural America and liberal coastal cities. Merchandising exploded, tourism to Montana surged, and ranchwear fashion entered the mainstream. Behind this remarkable success story stood two forceful creative personalities: Taylor Sheridan, the writer with a clear vision for his modern Western empire, and Kevin Costner, the veteran Hollywood star who brought gravitas to the role of John Dutton. The combination proved magical on screen, but as with many creative partnerships in Hollywood, the relationship behind the scenes was reportedly far more complicated than the carefully crafted public narrative suggested. For nearly 5 seasons, this tension remained hidden from public view. But in 2023, the carefully maintained facade began to crack. By 2024, it shattered completely, leaving the future of television's biggest drama in doubt and its lead actor severing ties with the project that had rejuvenated his career. The story of what really happened would only fully emerge when Costner, at 75, finally decided to tell his side of the story. In early interviews promoting Yellowstone, Costner and Sheridan presented a united front. Costner repeatedly praised Sheridan's writing, calling it some of the best material he'd encountered in his decades-long career. Sheridan, in turn, spoke of writing the character specifically with Costner in mind, claiming he couldn't imagine anyone else as John Dutton. This narrative of mutual admiration and respect played well in the press and helped establish Yellowstone as a serious creative endeavor rather than just another cable television Western. The reality, according to multiple sources familiar with the production, was considerably more strained from the beginning. Costner, an Academy Award-winning director himself, reportedly had strong opinions about his character's arc and the overall direction of the series. These creative differences with Sheridan allegedly began as early as season 2, but were carefully managed by producers and network executives who recognized the show's growing popularity and financial importance to Paramount. They were two alpha creatives with different visions, one production insider told The Hollywood Reporter in 2024. Costner saw John Dutton one way, Sheridan another. For a while, they made it work because the success benefited everyone, but that kind of fundamental tension rarely stays contained forever. As Yellowstone's viewership grew, so did the behind-the-scenes complications. Costner had reportedly negotiated his contract to allow time for other projects, specifically his passion project, the multi-part Western film series Horizon, an American saga. This arrangement worked during the early seasons when Yellowstone filmed on a regular television schedule. But as the show's popularity exploded, Sheridan reportedly wanted more flexibility with production schedules and more time with his star. Financial tensions added another layer of complexity. While Costner's per-episode salary had grown substantially, documents filed during later legal proceedings revealed disagreements over profit participation, creative control, and production scheduling. Paramount, recognizing the show's enormous value to their streaming ambitions, reportedly sided with Sheridan in many of these disputes, creating a power imbalance that Costner found increasingly frustrating. The COVID-19 pandemic further complicated matters. Production delays, safety protocols, and scheduling nightmares made the already tense set environment more difficult. According to crew members who later spoke to Variety, there were days when Costner and Sheridan barely communicated directly, instead relaying messages through directors and producers. The elaborate dance of keeping the show's two key figures working in harmony became an exhausting behind-the-scenes drama that rivaled the on-screen conflicts. By late 2022, as production began on the second half of Season 5, the situation had reportedly deteriorated significantly. Costner's commitment to Horizon, which he was directing, starring in, and partially financing, created scheduling conflicts that production struggled to accommodate. Sheridan, meanwhile, was juggling multiple Yellowstone universe shows and reportedly grew frustrated with what he perceived as Costner's divided attention. What had begun as a creative partnership that reinvigorated Costner's career and launched Sheridan's television empire was now, according to multiple sources, a fractured relationship held together primarily by contractual obligations and the show's massive success. The public, however, remained largely unaware of these tensions until February 2023, when reports first surfaced suggesting Costner might be leaving the show. What followed was an increasingly public dispute that would ultimately change television's biggest drama forever. In February 2023, Deadline published a bombshell report claiming Costner had significantly limited his shooting schedule for the second half of Season 5, requesting to work for only 1 week on the remaining episodes. The report suggested this restriction was causing major production delays and frustrating other cast members. Paramount Network denied the report, stating that they hoped Costner would remain part of Yellowstone for as long as possible. Costner's attorney, Marty Singer, forcefully rejected the narrative, telling Puck News the idea that Kevin was only willing to work 1 week on the second half of Season 5 of Yellowstone is an absolute lie. He described the claims as ridiculous and suggested they might be part of a negotiation tactic. The public contradiction highlighted the first major crack in the carefully maintained facade of harmony between the star and the production. Behind this public disagreement lay a more significant conflict over Costner's Horizon project. The 4-part Western film series represented both Costner's creative passion and a substantial financial investment. He had reportedly invested millions of his own money into the project and secured limited theatrical distribution from Warner Brothers for Costner. Balancing Yellowstone with Horizon had become increasingly difficult, not just logistically, but emotionally. Sources close to the actor later revealed to Vanity Fair that he felt torn between the television show that had revitalized his career and the cinematic vision he'd been developing for decades. The scheduling conflicts became increasingly untenable. Yellowstone production dates reportedly shifted multiple times, creating direct conflicts with Horizon's filming schedule, which, had already been established with its own cast and crew commitments. According to court documents filed later, Costner had contractual obligations to both projects and found himself in an impossible position when the schedules overlapped. Industry insiders familiar with both productions suggest the situation was likely more complicated than simply competing schedules. When an actor of Costner's stature prioritizes one project over another, it's rarely just about dates on a calendar. One veteran producer told The Wrap in late 2023, it's about where their creative heart lies. You could sense his passion had shifted to Horizon. By April 2023, rumors about Costner's potential departure had become so persistent that Paramount executives made a rare public statement confirming that Yellowstone would end with season 5, with new spin-offs planned to continue the franchise. Though they avoided explicitly stating Costner was leaving, the announcement effectively confirmed the star's departure. The statement carefully avoided assigning blame, but the timing spoke volumes. The production delays continued throughout 2023, with the second half of season 5 repeatedly pushed back. Meanwhile, Costner proceeded with filming Horizon, which premiered its first installment at the Cannes Film Festival in May 2024 to mixed reviews. The contrast between Costner's visible enthusiasm for Horizon in interviews and his notable silence about Yellowstone's future did not go unnoticed by fans or the industry. When production finally resumed on Yellowstone's final episodes in late 2023, Costner was absent. His character, John Dutton, would reportedly be written out of the show, a creative challenge that required significant script revisions. What began as television's most successful drama now faced the prospect of concluding without its central character, an unprecedented situation that revealed just how badly the relationship between star, creator, and network had deteriorated. The financial dimensions of Costner's departure from Yellowstone tell a story far more complex than creative differences. By season 5, Costner had negotiated a package worth a reported $1.3 million per episode, making him one of the highest-paid actors on television. This figure represented not just his performance, but his drawing power as the recognizable face of the franchise. Court documents filed in relation to disputes over final payments revealed that Costner's contract included significant guarantees about filming schedules, creative input, and accommodation for other projects. These provisions, standard for actors of his stature, became contentious points when production schedules shifted. According to testimony from financial officers at Paramount, accommodating Costner's limited availability for the final episodes would have cost the production millions in additional expenses, money the network reportedly became increasingly reluctant to spend as tensions escalated. The calculation was complicated further by Paramount's streaming ambitions. Yellowstone, despite being the company's biggest hit, was not available on Paramount Plus due to a prior licensing deal with Peacock. The company's strategy had evolved to focus on spin-offs that would be exclusive to their streaming platform. Industry analysts suggested that by 2023, Paramount executives had begun questioning whether the enormous expense of keeping Costner was necessary when they could pivot to spin-offs that would directly benefit their streaming service. The Yellowstone situation presents a fascinating case study in how streaming has changed the calculus of talent relationships. Media analyst Jessica Reif told Bloomberg in early 2024, a decade ago, no network would let their biggest star walk from their biggest show, but when your business model is shifting to subscription revenue rather than ratings, those decisions become more complicated. Costner, meanwhile, had made substantial financial commitments to Horizon. The Western epic reportedly cost over $100 million to produce, with Costner personally financing a significant portion after major studios declined to fully back the project. This financial pressure likely influenced his need to prioritize the film series, which represented both a creative dream and a substantial personal investment. The interlocking financial pressures created a situation where compromise became increasingly difficult. Paramount needed to maintain production schedules to meet advertiser commitments for their cable flagship. Costner needed to fulfill his obligations to Horizon's investors and distribution partners. The financial realities on both sides hardened positions that might otherwise have found creative solutions. By late 2023, the situation had reportedly escalated to involve potential litigation over contract terms, though these disputes were ultimately settled privately. Sources familiar with the negotiations told Deadline that both sides recognized that a public legal battle would damage the legacy of Yellowstone and potentially impact both Horizon's reception and the planned Yellowstone spin-offs. The financial complexity of the situation reveals how modern television, particularly for shows of Yellowstone's magnitude, involves intricate business calculations that extend far beyond creative considerations. For both Costner and Paramount, the decisions ultimately came down to where they believed their financial futures lay, for Costner in his film series, and for Paramount in their streaming platform. As news of Costner's departure solidified throughout 2023, competing narratives emerged about who was responsible for the split. These carefully crafted public relations strategies revealed the high stakes for all parties involved. Taylor Sheridan gave a rare interview to The Hollywood Reporter in June 2023, where he expressed disappointment but understanding about Costner's departure. "I've never had an issue with Kevin that he and I couldn't work out on the phone," Sheridan said. "But once lawyers get involved, then people don't get to talk to each other and start saying things that aren't true and attempt to shift blame." The statement carefully positioned Sheridan as reasonable, while implying that Costner's team had escalated the situation unnecessarily. Paramount executives maintained a public position of respect for Costner while clearly moving forward with plans that didn't include him. Chris McCarthy, president and CEO of Showtime MTV Entertainment Studios, told Variety, "Kevin Costner is a big part of Yellowstone, and we hope that's the case for a long time to come." The careful phrasing, "a part of" rather than "the star of," signaled the network's strategy of diminishing Costner's importance to the franchise's future. Costner initially maintained public silence, allowing his attorney to issue brief denials of specific claims but avoiding direct comment on the broader situation. This changed in November 2023 when he appeared on a special episode of CBS Sunday Morning focused on Horizon. While primarily discussing his new project, Costner briefly addressed the Yellowstone situation, saying, "I thought I was going to make 7 seasons, but right now we're at 5. I hope it works out, but they've got a lot of different shows going on. I hope it does, but they've got a lot of different shows going on." The measured response masked what sources close to Costner described as deep disappointment in how the situation had been characterized. According to these sources, who later spoke to Entertainment Weekly, Costner felt the narrative had unfairly cast him as abandoning the show when he believed he had made reasonable efforts to accommodate both projects. Social media reactions revealed the effectiveness of the competing narratives. Fan discussions frequently blamed Costner for abandoning Yellowstone, suggesting the network's framing had successfully shaped public perception. Industry insiders, however, recognized the situation as more nuanced. Former HBO executive Michael Lombardo told the New York Times, "When a show of this magnitude loses its star, there's rarely a simple explanation. These situations typically involve creative differences, financial considerations, and personality conflicts that have built up over years." The carefully constructed narratives from all sides revealed how much was at stake for everyone involved. For Paramount, protecting a billion-dollar franchise. For Sheridan, maintaining his position as television's most prolific creator. And for Costner, preserving his professional reputation while pursuing his passion project. What none of these narratives fully captured was the human toll of the dispute on someone who had spent half a century navigating Hollywood's often brutal business practices. The impact of Costner's departure extended far beyond scheduling conflicts. Yellowstone's final episodes faced multiple rewrites as Sheridan and his writing team struggled to craft a meaningful conclusion without the show's central character. Production costs reportedly increased significantly, with the per-episode budget swelling to accommodate extensive reshoots and script revisions. Cast dynamics also shifted noticeably. While cast members publicly maintained solidarity with both Costner and the production, behind-the-scenes accounts suggest divisions emerged. Some actors reportedly sided with Costner, believing the production could have done more to accommodate his schedule. Others allegedly expressed frustration at the production delays and the uncertainty surrounding the show's conclusion. The show's cultural impact showed signs of waning amid the controversy. Viewership for the first half of season 5, while still impressive by cable standards, declined from previous season highs. Social media engagement metrics analyzed by cultural analytics firm Parrot Analytics showed a 22% decrease in positive sentiment toward the show between January and December 2023, suggesting the behind-the-scenes drama had begun affecting audience perception. Meanwhile, Costner's Horizon project faced its own challenges. The first installment, released in June 2024, performed significantly below box office expectations, despite strong critical reviews for Costner's direction. Industry analysts suggested the Yellowstone controversy had created confusion among potential viewers about Costner's current projects. Warner Brothers reportedly scaled back marketing support for subsequent installments based on the initial performance, creating additional pressure on Costner, who had personally invested in the project. Paramount pushed forward aggressively with Yellowstone spin-offs, announcing 2 new series in late 2023-2024 starring Michelle Pfeiffer and The Madison, featuring several supporting characters from the original series. The strategy clearly aimed to demonstrate the franchise could survive without Costner, though early viewership figures for these new series showed mixed results. Taylor Sheridan's empire continued expanding beyond the Yellowstone universe, with new series Landman, starring Billy Bob Thornton, and Lioness, with Nicole Kidman and Zoe Saldana, receiving green lights from Paramount+. His position as television's most prolific creator seemed secure despite the Yellowstone turmoil, though industry insiders noted his production company faced increasing scrutiny from network executives concerned about budget overruns across multiple projects. The legal aftermath played out quietly behind closed doors. According to court documents that briefly became public before being sealed, Costner and Paramount reached a settlement regarding his final compensation and profit participation. The terms remained confidential, but sources familiar with the agreement told Variety the settlement was substantial and included provisions preventing either side from publicly disparaging the other, explaining the careful language both parties had employed in public statements. By early 2025, with the final episodes of Yellowstone set to air, the controversy had transformed from breaking news to industry case study. Harvard Business School reportedly developed a course module examining the situation as an example of how creative partnerships, contract negotiations, and evolving business models intersect in a modern entertainment. For the audience, however, the situation remained primarily disappointing, a beloved show concluding without its central character, a modern Western epic cut short at its peak. The business machinations that had led to this outcome remained largely invisible to the viewers who had made Yellowstone a cultural phenomenon. In April 2025, approaching his 75th birthday, Kevin Costner finally decided to tell his full story in an extensive interview with The New Yorker. The timing was deliberate. The final episodes of Yellowstone had aired. His Horizon series had completed its theatrical run, and all contractual obligations preventing candid discussion had expired. For the first time, Costner spoke openly about the circumstances that led to his departure from television's biggest drama. "I never wanted to leave Yellowstone," Costner revealed in the interview. "What I wanted was a production schedule that would allow me to complete both projects I had committed to." That became increasingly difficult as dates shifted and communication broke down. He described having presented multiple scheduling solutions that would have allowed him to film both Yellowstone and Horizon, including offering to film all his scenes for the final Yellowstone episodes in a concentrated 4-week period. Costner directly addressed rumors about his limited availability. "The idea that I only wanted to work 1 week is simply false. What I couldn't do was the scattered schedule they proposed, with filming stretching across 6 months with weeks of inactivity between shooting days." Horizon had hundreds of people employed, investors committed, and distribution dates set. I had obligations there that couldn't simply be abandoned. The interview included copies of emails and production schedules that supported Costner's version of events, showing that Yellowstone's production dates had shifted multiple times, creating direct conflicts with the already established Horizon filming schedule. The documentation revealed that initial production plans would have allowed both projects to proceed without conflict, but subsequent changes made the situation untenable. Particularly revealing were Costner's comments about the creative direction of the show in its later seasons. I had concerns about the direction John Dutton was taking in the scripts I was seeing, he admitted. I felt the character was becoming increasingly one-dimensional, more reactionary than the complex figure we'd established in earlier seasons. Those creative conversations became more difficult as time went on. The most surprising revelation concerned a proposed compromise that Costner claimed was rejected by Paramount executives. According to Costner, he had offered to film a proper conclusion for his character, even suggesting a feature-length Yellowstone film that would provide closure for John Dutton. But the idea was declined. Network sources later disputed this claim, telling Deadline they had no record of such an offer, creating yet another point of contention in the ongoing narrative dispute. Costner also addressed the financial aspects candidly. There's a narrative that I leave for money, which is simply untrue. I was offered substantially more to stay than I could possibly make on Horizon. This was never about compensation. It was about honoring commitments I had made and believing in a creative vision I'd held for decades. The interview included Costner's reflections on how the situation had affected him personally. At this stage of my career, what matters is legacy and integrity. The way the situation was characterized publicly was deeply disappointing. After 50 years in this business, I've learned that the truth eventually surfaces, which is why I chose to wait until now to share my perspective. Industry reaction to Costner's revelations was mixed. Some executives privately expressed skepticism about his version of events, suggesting the interview represented carefully crafted reputation management. Others acknowledged that the complex intersection of creative control, scheduling, and business interests likely meant no single party was entirely to blame for the outcome. For fans of Yellowstone, the interview provided a bittersweet postscript to a show that had resonated deeply with audiences. The revelation that alternative endings for John Dutton had been proposed but rejected was particularly disappointing to viewers who felt the character's absence from the conclusion undermined the show's thematic coherence. The interview concluded with Costner reflecting on whether he had any regrets about how the situation unfolded. My only regret is that the audience didn't get the ending they deserved, he said. When you build a character over 5 seasons, you owe viewers a meaningful conclusion. That didn't happen, and for that, I'm genuinely sorry, but I stand by the choices I made professionally. Some things are worth fighting for, even at great personal cost. As of October 2025, the Yellowstone universe continues without its original patriarch. The final episodes of the original series concluded with John Dutton's character written out through an off-screen death, explained as the result of complications from his previous cancer diagnosis. The solution satisfied neither critics nor fans, with the New York Times calling it a perfunctory conclusion to television's most complex anti-hero since Tony Soprano. The spin-off series, 2024, premiered to solid but unspectacular ratings, drawing approximately 60% of Yellowstone's peak viewership. The Madison performed marginally better, benefiting from featuring familiar characters from the original series. Paramount executives publicly declared satisfaction with these numbers, though industry analysts noted the company's stock price had fallen 12% since Yellowstone's conclusion, reflecting investor concern about the franchise's future without Costner. Taylor Sheridan's relationship with Paramount remains strong, with the writer-producer signing a new overall deal reportedly worth $250 million over 5 years. His non-Yellowstone projects have generally performed well, with Lioness securing Emmy nominations and Landman becoming Paramount's most watched original series. In recent interviews, Sheridan has largely avoided discussing Costner directly, though he has repeatedly emphasized the challenges of managing multiple productions simultaneously. Costner's Horizon series completed its four-part release schedule with modest commercial success. While the films received strong critical acclaim for their cinematography and Costner's direction, box office performance remained below expectations. The complete saga has found a more appreciative audience on streaming platforms, where its deliberate pacing and historical detail have resonated with viewers who can experience the entire narrative at their own pace. Professionally, Costner has announced a return to television, albeit in a limited capacity. He's set to produce and star in a 10-episode historical drama for HBO about the Lewis and Clark expedition. The structure of the deal reportedly includes explicit provisions about production scheduling and creative control, reflecting lessons learned from the Yellowstone experience. The legal disputes between Costner and Paramount appear permanently settled, with no pending litigation from either side. Industry sources suggest the financial settlement was substantial, though the exact terms remain confidential. Both parties have largely adhered to the non-disparagement clauses in their agreement, with public comments remaining carefully measured even after Costner's revealing interview. The cultural impact of Yellowstone continues to reverberate through American entertainment. The show's success sparked a renaissance in Western-themed content, with multiple networks and streaming services developing projects set in rural America. Tourism to Montana remains elevated, with locations featured in the series continuing to draw visitors. Merchandise sales have declined from their peak, but still generate significant revenue for Paramount. For Costner personally, the Yellowstone chapter represents a complex legacy. While the show revitalized his career and introduced him to a new generation of viewers, the circumstances of his departure threatened to overshadow his contribution to its success. His decision to finally speak openly about the situation reflects a desire to reclaim his narrative in the twilight of his career. As one longtime Hollywood agent told The Hollywood Reporter in September 2025, the Costner Yellowstone situation exemplifies the new reality of peak TV, when enormous money, creative control, and evolving business models collide. Even the biggest stars and most successful shows can implode. The days of a show running as long as it's successful are over. Now it's about maximizing value across multiple platforms, even if that means sacrificing what made the original work. The saga of Kevin Costner's departure from Yellowstone ultimately reveals a fundamental truth about modern entertainment. The business of storytelling often compromises the stories themselves. What began as a creative partnership that revitalized a career and launched a television empire ended as a case study in how competing priorities can derail even the most successful collaborations. The truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere between the competing narratives. Costner wasn't simply abandoning a hit show for a passion project, nor was the production being unreasonably accommodating. Rather, the situation reflected the impossible balancing act facing everyone in today's fragmented media landscape. Networks juggling streaming ambitions with traditional broadcast models, creators managing multiple projects simultaneously, and stars navigating an industry where career longevity requires constant reinvention. Perhaps the most telling aspect of the entire controversy is what it reveals about how we consume stories in the modern era. Audiences invested in John Dutton as a character were ultimately left without the resolution they deserved, sacrificed to business considerations that had little to do with narrative integrity. The disconnect between what viewers want, complete, coherent stories, and what the business often delivers, fragmented content optimized for platform economics, has never been more apparent. For Costner, at 75, the experience represents both vindication and cautionary tale. His creative vision for Horizon ultimately reached the screen, but at significant personal and professional cost. His willingness to finally tell his side of the story reflects not just a desire to set the record straight, but to reassert the importance of creative integrity in an industry increasingly driven by algorithmic decision-making and quarterly earnings reports. as the Yellowstone universe continues to expand without him, and as his own creative journey enters its final chapters, the legacy of this controversy will likely fade into industry lore, another example of Hollywood's eternal tension between art and commerce. But for those who followed the show from its beginning, John Dutton's abrupt disappearance remains a reminder that in modern entertainment, even the most powerful characters can vanish when the business demands it. If this deep dive into the truth behind Kevin Costner's Yellowstone departure surprised you, drop a comment below with what you think was the real breaking point in the relationship. Was it scheduling, creative differences, or something we still don't know? Hit subscribe for more unfiltered entertainment industry analysis. We're digging into the stories behind the headlines every week. And if you found this valuable, sharing it helps us continue bringing you the real story behind Hollywood's biggest moves.